Welcome to Nav Chat, the show for the New Zealand orienteering and navigation sports community. Tom, we're on. Welcome
Indeed.
to Nav Chat. Welcome everyone. So, Tom, can you tell us what we've come up with here? What's the plan for Nav Chat, and what are we hoping to offer?
So we figure this is a bit of an experiment, but we want to try and share a bunch of navigation sport related content in New Zealand. So we are going to be trying to do a monthly podcast with visual aids that shares interesting stories about orienteers and navigators in New Zealand, include some coaching tips and ways to get better yourself, and also share news and updates from orienteering and navigation sport around the country.
Yeah, that's right. I'm really looking forward to it. Both of us have had a play around with blogging in the past, and I think while that was fun, I think we both find a more audio-friendly format to be pretty appealing. And we think there's a lot of space to share stories at the moment. There's a lot going on in the world of orienteering and navigation sports in New Zealand. There's a lot of interesting things that are going under the radar. So we're here to share all that and bring it in front of everyone, and also share coaching tips, which is something that we love to do in our spare time, and also more seriously as well. So we've had some experience with coaching professionally, so I think we've got a lot to share, and it's pretty open-ended at this stage. We're really interested to see where this goes. So what do we have in store for people in this first episode?
So we're going to be going to an interview with Kyle Higham, who's going to give us some insights before National Orienteering Champs, which are coming up at Labour Weekend. We're going to build on that with some coaching tips, and then we have got some correspondents around the country who have given us some of the recent happenings in orienteering. But hey, before we do that, how's your training for Nationals looking, Gene? I heard that you were thinking of maybe not competing.
Yeah, that's right. So of course we haven't been able to see many people for really this whole year. So the news is I've been really out since December last year. I've had a very long running injury that I incurred in December, and we've kind of failed the rehab multiple times. So I'm still out. I had a cortisone steroid injection 3 weeks ago now, and the recovery from that as a therapy is still undergoing, and my ITB in my right knee is really struggling to enable me to actually get into some training. So this afternoon I'm back on the elliptical trainer, but no running for me for another 2 weeks. So no nationals for me. Tom, how are you looking?
Good. I'm fizzing. I can't wait for nationals.
Yes.
I've missed it for the last few years, and my very first nationals was down in a similar part of the country back in 2004 or something like that. So I am pumped to get amongst it. Going to head out tonight with just for a run, just with a map in hand from down that part of the country, just to get the brain thinking. We're a week and a bit to go. So yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people going to be very rusty for this New Zealand Champs. I think we're all pretty undercooked this year. With the COVID situation really limiting the number of events that we could have done. So that's the least you can do is at least get a map in front of your brain.
That's right, so a bit of that. And we've got some tips coming up. I understand you spoke to Kyle Higham.
I did. I had 10 minutes with Kyle to talk to him specifically as a local. So he's grown up in Levin and is currently living there at the moment. And he was my age coming through the junior ranks, and he's had a lot of experience with orienteering, and I think he's a good person to talk to when looking at those maps. A bit of a fun fact about Kyle is I'm sure you remember catching features. I'm not sure how much time you spent playing that. We got pretty into catching features when we were juniors, really trying to up our nav skills. Kyle was number 1 in New Zealand, and he was right up there in the world actually. He was very good at catching features.
So catching features is that online orienteering game. For me, never really my scene. I could never keep up with you guys. So
it's pretty interesting one. So yeah, let's jump to
Kyle.
Interview with Kyle. Hi Kyle.
Hey, how you doing? Can you hear
Very
me?
well. Thanks for sharing some time.
No worries.
So we're going to get into having a look at Fusillia, which sounds like is a fairly relevant map for one of the races at Nationals. You're a little closer to the events than I am. So can you tell me which events are most similar to which of the two maps we're going to look at today?
Yeah, so Fusillia is just north of the long distance map. So that will be very relevant. I understand it's very similar. There's no like special terrain or anything that you have to worry about it. And then the middle distance is actually on Osgiliath with some new added bits. But it's stuff that people will have experienced before, but it's quite different terrain than the long distance. So.
Okay, let's start by looking at Fusillia. I'll just share my screen with you. So hopefully you can see that appear. Cool. So what we're looking at is, I mean, clearly some similarities to other sand dunes elsewhere in the country. Quite flat, quite white, some squiggly contours, but it's not exactly the same as the stuff we have here in Auckland, and it's quite different to what's in Christchurch. How do you describe the terrain on the Kapiti coast?
It's extremely flat. There isn't really much of a gradient to it at all. Like if a tsunami was to hit this place, it would be the safe zone would be 10 kilometers inland. Whereas Woodhill was kind of all on this slope almost, and so all of the contour detail tend to be lumped together, and they kind of form these little pockets of detail with just complete flatness all the way around them. And the other thing, which is probably common to Woodhill as well, is that the type of forest, like the age of the forest, changes block to block. So your strategies might change depending on the age of the trees, which change visibility. It changes the underfoot. And so, for example, on this map, you can see your bearings in the top half of the map are very, very good, very, very straight.
Yeah, I'm noticing that as well. I've got a vague memory of some denser forest down this end. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. And so here it's just much harder to keep a straight line, and almost every control on that block, you can see it's sort of drifting off a little bit. Maybe that was intentional to fight.
I'm clearly not having a good time in that block.
Yeah.
I don't recall it exactly, but I recall being quite frustrated with how I came into this area very hot, very confident from the first part of the course, and had the biggest challenges of the race in that area.
Yeah. So I think one of the main things you have to think about in these areas is to just adapt your strategy. You're always going to be basically taking a bearing straight through the forest, but adapting how much simplification you need to do to keep on track, and maybe some corrective mechanisms so you can tell if you're shifting off the line or not.
Yeah, there's certainly safer ways to do some of these legs, like 6 to 7. I could have intentionally aimed off to this track and then run along the track, but I was trying to do it perfect and got punished. Whereas I think in some of these other areas further north where the visibility is a lot higher, you can see really, really far through here. So you can really go balls to the wall and wing it and work it out on the fly.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. Let's jump across to.
No, I understand the stuff further south. The long distance is of the scrappier variety, so it is going to be a little harder to keep your to keep your bearing than it is for these first few controls, for example.
So this is the well-renowned Osgiliath map. Is this close to Fusillia?
No. So this is a completely different forest. I would say about 20 or 30 kilometers south. This is the Manawatu River, the thing on the
Oh,
right
cool.
there, and then you got the ocean on the left. Yeah, and so the area is called Osgiliath or Waitariri Northwest, which is this exact corner, but with a bit added on top of the northern section. So, and because it's a middle distance, I assume the course setter will be sending you guys into the macrocarpa. So there won't be too much in the
So
way
the
of
macrocarpa is
on the coastal side.
this coastal side. Is it the whole coastal strip or just part of the coastal strip?
It's basically all the white and green you see there on the western side of that road. It's all macrocarpa until you hit the dunes and the beach, and then you just hit that horrible, messy fight stuff. Yeah,
Kind of that stuff there, right? Is these dense macrocarpa trees, very spiky, lots of branches coming at you in the eyes.
Yeah.
I remember.
And even the white is macrocarpa. It's a little easier to get through, but it's still hard to keep a straight line because it's not trimmed at all. It's just there as a coastal strip, as a protective layer for the rest of the trees. So they don't maintain it or anything. And so yeah, the branches are. Yeah, I'm surprised no one's taken an eye out yet. Actually, it's actually very, very difficult to run through very quickly.
This is actually Nick Hand's course, and I'm wondering 20 to 21 whether that's intentional or not. I mean, it's hard to tell whether that's actually the right way to go about doing it or not, because trying to go straight through a lot of that dense vegetation looks pretty slow, and it's pretty hard to keep contact. So why not boom it out to the track and along and back in? I'm not quite sure. We'll have to ask Nick to know.
Yeah, well, I understand he was taking quite a safe route for these ones here, according to the description of this particular map. He might have even put the controls out or something. But if you look at his course further north as well, you can see he's taking routes around the macrocarpa.
Yeah. So if Nick Han is doing evasive maneuvers around the macrocarpa, then pretty much all of us should be taking an option like that pretty seriously. But when we're into the white forest, I imagine straight is great for most of this stuff. You want to pick off the big features, use the visibility when you can. These patches of detail are very abrupt, aren't they?
Yeah. But there are actually quite big features within them. It's kind of hard to tell if you're just glancing at them, but there are some decent-sized hills there, and they're kind of lost in the sort of maze of contours.
Yeah, some of these guys are quite steep.
Yeah.
I think this is maybe one of the defining differences between this and Woodhull Forest is I think how steep and very sharp up and down a lot of these contours here, these ridges, very, very up and down, very close together. Lots of contours close together. Cool.
Yeah, and then you can just boost it between the two.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you for that insight, Kyle. And hope some people can take that advice into the races ahead. That was great hearing from Kyle. I always feel that the navigation should be so easy when I'm looking at the maps on the computer or just in my hand, but obviously the evidence suggests otherwise. You could see my route from those years ago, and I was doing a lot of orienteering training then. I was no slouch either, and I was tripping up. I was slipping up big time in that race, and I was trying to really push the pace and push hard, but you could see how frequently I came unstuck. And my memory from that race is a lot of frustration, actually.
Oh, sand dunes like that. It asks you to run fast, high speed, or what is it? The bigger the speed, faster your speed, the bigger the mess. I reckon that's true for orienteering as well. So there's some good insights from Kyle, though. I think a couple of real important ones I took away. That vegetation comment about especially the macrocarpa. File that away. Did you recall that from your run?
Yeah, the Macacarpa has always been a big challenge for everyone who goes into the Osgiliath map. There's, I think, that change in speed, and that just the low branches are, honestly, I couldn't emphasize what Kyle's saying enough. You have to change your mindset going into that stuff.
Totally, yeah.
Even as the map looks very similar, physically you just get pushed around so much. And especially when the race pressure's on and you're like, I have to move faster, you just find a way to move faster all over the place that's not at all relevant to your navigation. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So, yeah, put that in the back of your mind if you're heading to Nationals for race day. The other thing I think that I'll be remembering is the differences between that Fusillia kind of area and the Osgiliath. Kyle just seemed to he just seems to implicitly know it from living down that way, but might mean some slightly different techniques between the two. Which maybe leads us on to our next little coaching segment.
Let's take a closer look at Osgiliath now. Nice. So this is again from a few years ago. Osgiliath here. We'll just do a quick overview. This is the elite men's course, 12 kilometers on fairly flat white sand dune. So it's not the longest 12 kilometers you'll do, but as you can see, there are some rough parts, especially. I think
that would be comparable to what we're expecting at Nationals, right? Because I think we've got 13k for course 1, so you can only imagine that this is maybe similar mix of dunes and forest to what we might see next weekend.
That's definitely what I'm imagining to see. Something like this, and let's take a look at a few legs here.
So should we hone in, because Kyle mentioned about really vague terrain. So I know a perennial complaint of Kiwi orienteers is I stuffed up my compass. I couldn't do my bearing. My direction was no good. And hey, that's me too. I would call myself a weak compass orienteer. Let's hone in a bit on how we can utilize compass and compass associated techniques to succeed in this kind of lower North Island sand dune terrain.
Yeah, so my thoughts whenever I'm talking about compass is what are we trying to achieve? Well, we're trying to cover less distance in a number of cases. That's the first point. The second point is we're trying to move in a direction that we know we are moving in. So maybe you are intentionally trying to go off to the side, which might be aiming off, but as long as you know that you're on the line that you're planning to be on, then the chance of all sorts of future errors go down. So there's two things we're trying to achieve there.
Let's just introduce aiming off, What's that?
Yeah, let's really focus on that. So you can see on this leg, 16 to 17, I've gone dead straight. That might not always be the right strategy to employ. So we take a look at one example here from 18 to 19. You can see that in this particular case, I've intentionally aimed to this track, knowing that I will hit the track, and then once I hit the track, I will bend right. That's one example of aiming off.
Okay, so you're identifying a catching feature on your route, something that is linear and obvious, and then you're intentionally aiming your compass direction a little bit one way so that when you hit that compass feature, you know which way to turn. Great. You've used a road. You can do this on contours. You can do it on vegetation. You can do it on any catching feature. And hey, sometimes you can even do it behind the control. If you're really worried about the nav, the catching feature might be something behind that you aim off towards, know which way you turn, and then come into the control.
Yeah, that's right. I think I can give a really good example of aiming off that I think will be quite relevant to both orange and red. I'm going to imagine that we're coming at 14 from this direction.
Okay. So like our control was on that little pond, for example?
Yeah, say there was another control down here somewhere.
Cool.
So the interesting thing about this control at 14 is that it's in this area of detailed contours here. And there are some hills, and yep, sure, you can work it out. It's possible to know where you are in there. But because you've got this big area of flat terrain beforehand, if you've drifted through here, then you hit this area of detail and you might not know exactly where you are when you collide with the detail. And so do you go right? Do you go left? You're obviously not going to go too far. That's not the challenge here. The challenge has been too far left or too far right. So what you could do is, instead of going dead straight, is you could intentionally aim. So we'll just get rid of this line. Say we're coming from down here. What you could do is hit this track, run along to here, and instead of trying to aim directly at the control, you could aim slightly to the left. So we're still taking a good compass bearing, but because we're aiming to the left, we know that the control is to the right once we hit this line of detail. Thoughts on that, Tom?
Totally, I agree. I think, so especially in this Osgiliath terrain, these hills all look the same. The linear hills, once you hit them, they're one contour, they're form lines. You don't really have any attack points super close to the control, and I know that the setters will be trying to challenge us with this sort of thing. So I completely agree, and I think that it's super important on these long linear sand dunes. I will be aiming off a lot, especially because I'm a little rusty. I will want that extra margin of error. So this is a longer leg. I would say that you could utilize this on a short leg too. Do we have any little short legs? We might be able to talk that through.
Yep. We can use almost the same leg, because it could. Oh, well, if you're thinking about, I mean, even just something like from there across.
Yeah.
Is anywhere where you have something with no handrails in it. Anywhere with no handrails, aiming off is a really good technique to employ.
Nice. So we're going to notice these linear catching features. We're going to aim off in one direction for safety, so we know which way to turn, so we can get our control. What about the actual execution of the compass? What do you have any hints for? Because it's all well and good to say take a bearing, but that can be pretty hard sometimes. And I know I have difficulties holding that straight line. I mean, you 16 to 17, you look like you were pretty good, but even then you've maybe picked up that track, I think, but otherwise it's pretty straight. How do you do it?
That's right. So 16 to 17, let's just talk about the first half of that leg. I'm doing that purely on the compass. There's nothing interesting to read. There's a little detail there, but all I'm doing is taking the time to line that compass up. I've got my compass on the map. I'm not rushing out of 16. I'm ensuring that the needle is steady, that my map is perpendicular to my body, and I'm looking ahead into the terrain as far as I can see. This is nice white forest. You can see quite far, 100 meters or so. And I'm really plowing on forwards, really reaching forwards into the terrain, and just keeping these big straight sections that I'm just repeatedly.
Okay. Because sometimes I'll look ahead and I'll see a tree or something in the distance on my line, and I'll run to that. And as I'm approaching it, I'll look at my map again. Do you do that, or does it not really work for you?
Yeah, I do that. When I'm doing my best bearings, I do that. When I'm not doing that, I'm not doing my best bearings. So do as I do, not as I say is often the case. But I think, I can tell the difference between those days when I'm kind of in a little bubble, just trying to focus on the bearing, and those days when I'm really reaching forwards into the terrain, looking forwards.
The other thing I do it again, probably like you say, when I'm doing my best bearings. Someone told me when I was learning that sometimes they're like actually physically, like, just you look like a bit of a weirdo in the forest, but putting your hand up and pointing which way you're going to go can sometimes just give you that real physical push to where you want to be. So punch control, map on the compass, nice and square, head up, arm up, pick your control, run on and on.
Yep, that's right. So back to this leg quickly. This first part of the leg, I'm using purely compass, and I'm being caught by the pond. Nice.
Okay. Attack point, or stepping stone, we could call it, or an attack point. Yep.
I've got a little handrail here on this track. I've used it to improve my speed a little bit. That's neither here nor there. From here onwards, I've got this big flat area here that I've identified. and I'm actually counting off these hills on the way. So I'm using both the compass and the contours in that part. So there's a both. If there's a chance to use both, we're using both. The first part of this leg, you can get away with it because there's this really obvious catching feature. And you're not getting a control circle here. If the control circle was after a big section of nothing, that's the hardest thing in the world to do.
So I guess to summarise and wrap up these points, we would say that aiming off is a really good way to make your bearing safer. Pick a catching feature that either the control's on, just before the control or just after. Aim off one direction, like over aim, and then so you know you can turn back to the control. Compass and actually executing a bearing involves a bit of discipline, so making sure you're getting a good exit from the control, a good look at your map, like you said, reaching into the terrain for new features, and then last of all, realising that it's not an either or thing, it's a compass and. So you can use your compass in combination with these handrails. What do you reckon? Sound about right?
That's great. That's great. So good luck to people out there using those techniques. Unfortunately, we don't have a training camp to sharpen ourselves up beforehand.
All right. So
I'll get it right.
You might not be in the forest, but I will be trying my best to do that. Based on my recent performance, I need all the help I can get. I'm very rusty. Should we jump to our news and events segment?
That's right. Yep.
So for this is just going to be a rundown of what's happening around the country, interesting things we've spotted, and we've got a few correspondents around the country, you could call them, who've flicked us some information, and we're hopefully going to gather a few more so we can have a more complete look around the country. Whangarei, that's where I am. Whangarei's been pretty isolated with lockdown, but they had a wicked double-header sprint while Auckland was in level 3. They had multi-level areas on the map, which I don't have the map in front of me, but those mapping tunnels is always tricky. And this was a remap by the Monktons, and I think it was pretty clear how they represented some of the canopies and run-throughs. Northwest, what's been happening in Auckland?
So Northwest hosted their first event after the Auckland lockdown in Riverhead Forest. So I think that was a pretty big shock to a number of people. It's pretty unkind on once you lose contact in those vague contours and the denser vegetation. So it was short courses, but there were definitely some long times. And I'm glad that I wasn't out there. Actually, I was just chilling in the event centre. But I think it was better to have a shakeout before New Zealand champs than not. So.
Totally, yeah.
I'm sure everyone was super happy to get into the forest, even though that it was very demanding.
Definitely. Sounds like counties have been busy, we've heard. They are still hosting North Island secondary schools and have had to move around quite a bit with COVID, so sounds like they've had some very busy volunteers, so kudos to counties.
Yeah, it's tough having to organise these events with this uncertainty of COVID, and it's been something we've been dealing with since March with Northwest Orienteering Club. Constantly cancelling events. Here's a funny one. I was cancelled by the first lockdown. I had an event I was course setting, stomped out by the first lockdown, and an event that I was doing in August, I think it was. That was the first weekend of the second lockdown. So it's just so tough on volunteers trying to organise this stuff, given the uncertainty. Yep.
Hopefully not for too much longer. It's cool to see that counties are going to be able to run North Islands, and sounds like they've got some TV coverage even.
Yeah, that's right. So Sky Sport have this package that is across many sports where they're trying to bring some exposure to school sport to the wider community. And so ONZ is working with a company called Stream Shop, and they do recording, and they can do like live recording of sports events. This one's not going to be live, but it's the same as what we had at New Zealand secondary schools last year, where they were out there recording. They had a number of people with cameras. I think there was a drone as well that they had doing some aerial photography, and then they compile some stuff afterwards, and that gets put on Sky Sport, which is super cool.
Nice, nice.
And we're upgrading now. Like we've got GPS trackers coming, so I'm going to be running a GPS tracking experiment on the weekend. So some lucky or unlucky school students are going to have a GPS tracker on their back, and we're going to be collecting their GPS data, and we've got commentary. So yeah, we're stepping this stuff up, and I'm really looking forward to the future.
Wow, sounds exciting, super exciting. Heading further south, OBOP. They have been focused a bit on MTBO. They've had a couple of mountain bike road games out in Whaka Forest, and they've got their mountain bike adventure quest coming up. Real family targeted event, that one. And I've had like a cryptic message saying they've got a cool new map coming for Northern Region Champs next year. So I would keep an eye out for that if I was you. Keep staying in the Central North Island. Hillary Challenge sees a lot of orienteers taking part, and it's got a big navigation component as well. Motueka College grabbed the win. Plenty of Nelson Orienteering Club members in there, which is pretty cool. I didn't race that myself, but exciting there. Moving south, I've just found this looking around online. Marlborough Orienteering Club seem like they've had a good few number of events lately, including a map and race in August on aerial photos as their base map, which is pretty cool. I think that's a great way to try and reduce your overheads. We'll maybe try and catch up with someone from Marlborough just to talk about it, but yeah, I thought that was a real cool idea.
This is pretty novel. I think I've seen a little bit of stuff like this for some of the schools adventure racing, where they're just trying to get people. It was a pretty low cost way of doing some kind of navigation. So yeah, it's doable, and if it's a great way of bringing new people to the concept of navigation and getting your direction and making route choice decisions, then that's all you really need. So it's great to see them like an under-resourced club really trying to deliver whatever they can to
a small club.
A small club. I mean, even you compare it to Northwest, like we can easily make maps like this. So yeah, they've got a different pull on their volunteers, and this is great. This is great to see. This is really innovative.
I reckon we try and get someone from Marlborough on the line, because they're doing lots of cool stuff, and will be an awesome perspective to hear. Further south still, down in Papo, the ultra long up at Castle Hill was wicked. More tracking and some monster legs up there. Worth looking at the ONZ website, where there's some breakdown of some of the legs. Was lots of stuff to learn. It was cool. The University of Canterbury Club have been getting into row gains and training events. And the other good news is that the multi-day early 2021, while it won't be Oceania's, is going to happen. So make sure that if you're keen, you get in there. I would be most excited about Preble Hill, one of the hills in the Castle Hill Basin, covered in rock, like Kura Tawhiti, but different.
Yeah, I've driven past that hill numerous times, just drooling against the window of the car. Like, it looks amazing to race up in that labyrinth of rocks. So can't wait to get there.
Hopefully we can pick up a few more correspondents around the country. It would be great to hear what's happening in the other clubs. And we've put this together on a pretty short timeline. So look out for more news next time. Before we close, Gene, though, I've got a couple of questions for you for Nationals. So I want a pick from you. Not who's going to win M21. Do you think anyone will do a hat trick? Who's going to win sprint, middle, long in their age group?
Yeah, you can definitely see the experience in some of these older age groups. There are some people who have, had time as a top elite, and are holding their own through their age groups. So
I've got one condition, or two conditions. You can't have Val Robinson and you can't have Ian Holden, because they look like they might be the only competitors in W80 and W85. So
they can have their grades to themselves, yeah.
Even with competitors, maybe they'd still do it. But any other picks? Who are you going for?
Well, maybe there's some local bias here, but I like the look of Mark Lawson. I think he's so strong, and maybe there's some reminiscing about the old times when Northwest was top dogs with you as a junior and him as the top elite in the country. But he's carried that physical strength and navigation prowess through the grades. So yeah, I'd love to put my money behind a guy like Mark Lawson.
All right, yeah, no, he's a good bet, I think. Mark will be solid. I'm going to be a bit different. I'm going to keep it in Auckland, but I'm going to say Ross Brighouse in M70. I was chatting to Dave Middleton on the weekend, and he said he was thinking Ross was looking pretty good. So, again, super experienced.
Previous World Masters champion.
Exactly.
Can't go past that.
We'll have to see next time, Mark or Ross. All right. That's us for this month, I think.
Yeah, yep. That's what all that we've got for you this month, and we look forward to coming back next month with some more updates and some more coaching tips, and we'll see how this whole thing develops. So thank you for listening.
Yeah, suggestions appreciated. Cool. Ka kite.
If you liked the show, please support it by sharing this podcast with one person who would benefit from it. The best place to find more content like this is at genebeverage.nz, where you can find years of training blogs, race reports, podcasts, and coaching videos. If you don't want to miss future episodes, I recommend subscribing to my newsletter by visiting genebeverage.nz or by following on social media, Perfect Flow on Facebook and Gene Beverage on Instagram. For Q&A, send messages to nav@perfectflow.nz.